Last time we said that we have to obtain the correct data, and there are actually a lot of things to consider when we talked about obtaining the correct data. So please go back to our previous video lesson because that teaches you on how to obtain the correct data and what are these things to consider for us to identify whether or not the data is correct. So the link to our previous video is given in the description box below. So granting that we have already obtained our data, now the next step that we are going to do is that we're going to clean it and then explore it. So before we continue, please don't forget to click the subscribe button because we do have a lot in store for you guys. We have lessons, how to master machine learning algorithm, and also the different machine learning algorithms, the deep learning mathematics, the deep learning algorithms, natural language processing, and a lot more courses in data science. And don't forget to share this with your friends. As what I've said, when the data is already available, your data science team can work on it. And the first thing that they have to do is they first have to clean it and then explore it. And this kind of step is actually very basic in all forms of data science project. And so when it comes to data cleaning, there are actually a lot of tools you can use. And the kind of programming language that you are going to use may depend on which one you are familiar with or you are expert in. You may also use Excel. That is if the data is not that big. And maybe you would like to ask me, if the data is already clean, does it mean that is it already suitable for use? Is it ready for usage? The answer is actually it is not automatically suitable for use. And maybe you would like to ask me, why is it like that? Because there are actually some things that you still have to consider before we have to use this data for developing our machine learning or deep learning models. So in this video lesson, we're going to just have two of these considerations, and there are actually a lot of things that you have to consider. And I think this video lesson is not big enough to contain all of these necessary requirements. So what we will have is just the two most important requirements. The first requirement is that your data must be representative. And when we say representative data, it must be something that is closest, more or less closest to the reality. Because this is what good representation is all about. It must describe what the reality is. It must be authentic. It must not give us something that is synthetic, because when our data is synthetic, then the result would not give justice to our efforts, and in the end, it can never give us the proper solution. That is why at the very beginning of this series, I talked about how we are going to create our own data, and that is always my proposal, that you have to create your own data. At the present time, there are actually a lot of advanced algorithms, and these advanced algorithms are actually very smart, and they can learn very properly from examples. And now the question is this: when your example is not authentic, when it's not very close to the reality, then what it can learn is not the reality. And because it's not learning the reality, the solution it can offer is misplaced. And when it is misplaced, you know what I mean. It's not going to give the best and the right solution to our problem. And in fact, it can never give us the proper description of the reality when our model is applied to another data set. So you always have to check whether or not your data is a good representation of the reality. And maybe you would like to ask me, do we have some kind of tests for us to be able to identify if the data really meets this criterion? So for the data to be a good representative, there are actually two tests that we have to take note of. And any data that we have should undergo this process of evaluation. The first one is that our data must be diversified. And what do we mean when we say diversified? Just from the word itself, diversified means many. It is of many kinds. Most importantly, it refers to the data sources. And when we say data sources, we are going to think not only the source that we have in our organization or company, but we have to think of other sources outside our databases. Today, having a lot of sources, data sources, is not actually a big problem. It's because we can generate that in so many forms. The kind of technology that we have makes our data science project even more interesting and challenging. We can collect enormous amount of data. The introduction of the Internet of Things even has made this diversification of data points even more interesting and beautiful. So you have to think beyond what is already available. When you have this kind of data in your database, you have to look for other sources. So for example, if you would like to know the tastes of your customer for your product, I think it's not enough to just ask them face to face. It's not enough to just have an interview over the phone. There are actually a lot of sources. You can use a social media. You can mine their interests by understanding their comments. So with this, you would be able to understand their sentiment, whether they like it, they like your product or not. Think outside the box. Think of all possible sources of your data. But of course, we always have to think of data privacy, and we always have to think of and respect data ethics. Not because we need this data, we're going to violate someone else's privacy. So this is always a caveat in gathering the different data from different sources. So ethics first before accessing to other sources of data. The number 2 requirement is that your data must be complete. So when we say completeness, it's not actually about being perfect, because no data can be perfect after all. That can be the remotest possibility if we are thinking of huge amount of data. So what it means is that whether or not our data has all the necessary details that we need for our study. And maybe you would like to ask me, would it be possible if there are just some points that are missing in our data? Can that still be considered complete or comprehensive? The answer is actually yes, for as long as there are some other points in your data that you can have inference from and can describe the missing details in other data points. And also, the timeliness of your data is very important in this case. And why is it that being timely is very important? The reason for that is the characteristics, the behavior, the trends change. So it means to say that the business data, the kind of data that you had 5 years ago, 10 years ago, are not representative of the real situation. At present, it's because those behaviors, those trends that you had in the past do not describe the real scenario at the present. And so the solution that those things tell you are not the right solutions that can be given to the present situation. So in short, those data are not anymore relevant. So just don't use it. Don't distort your plan. Don't distort your strategy. So don't forget, it must be diversified, it must be complete. So these 2 things make our data more representative. And being a good representative of the reality can actually boost the confidence in your project and also in your solution. Now, let's go to the second requirement for our data to be usable. And it is our data must be of good quality. And when we talk about of good quality, then we refer to completeness, we refer to consistency, and we refer to its being obvious. So in this case, we are also talking about the absence of human error. And if in cases when human error may not be avoided, but at least it is very minimal. So these are the things that you need for you to be able to say that the data that you clean is readily and obviously suitable for a usage, and you can now properly explore it and use it to model different algorithms that are applicable for a given business case. Do you want to know more about this channel? Just click the card on your right screen. You can enjoy our deep learning, mastering machine learning, natural language processing, machine learning and deep learning algorithms, and a lot more. courses in data science. Here, you can always learn and upskill for free.